Welcome to Africa Media Australia. I'm Kad Shawari. Thank you for tuning in. Last week, I talked about the increase of violence and criminal activities by a section of the South Sudanese Australian youth here in Melbourne. And there were a lot of reactions to that publication, to that video. And this week, I thought I will continue to discuss the same topic, but trying to look into some of the causes that may explain the increase of these antisocial behaviors. So I'll be discussing the matter today with a gentleman whose name is Dr. Santino Atem Deng. He's from a South Sudanese Australian background, and I will just ask him to introduce himself so we know a little bit more about him before we go into the topic.
I came from South Sudan originally, went to New Zealand in early 2000, did all my study there up to master degree, and then got a scholarship in 2013 and moved to Australia here where I did my studies about 4 years ago practically.
Now, you did a PhD thesis on parenting within South Sudanese Australian community. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the research that I carried out for the last 4 years was mainly prompted by the work that I was doing in the community, and I kind of realized that the new settlers have a lot of issues when they move to a new country because they have there are a lot of cultural shock. Parenting are quite different from where they came from. So I kind of realized that there are a lot of problems actually that need to be addressed, and to be addressed especially for African community and other new settlers, there has to be a major research to identify what are those issues and probably make recommendations.
Was the research only on South Sudanese communities, or did you also cover other African communities living in Australia?
Well, the participants were South Sudanese, but when you're conducting research, you have to narrow it down to a particular group. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't touch on other ethnic communities, especially other African, because they have a lot of commonalities. So I did the literature review did cover a lot from other aspects. The title of my research was Family and Parenting in Different Contexts, and basically looking at what are the parenting practices that South Sudanese brought with them to Australia, and what was changing, what are the impact of those changes, and how are they navigating around or mediating the changes, and what can be done to help them more.
Did your study find that the South Sudanese parenting practices were different from the parenting practices in Australia?
Absolutely. I kind of found that because what I did, I look at the what sort of parenting practices that South Sudanese came with them here, the traditional way of parenting, as a journey to help me understand what was going on after coming here. So when I look at what is changing after coming here, there are a lot of issues, and to do with the fact that parents that come from other cultures, especially in Africa, that parents have to discipline their children physically, and they also have the full custody of their children, and the government intervention within the family is very, very minimal. So when they came here, some of them were shocked to learn that there is a child protection who can intervene. So if they believe that you're not treating your child right. So there was a real shock in that regard, and also the freedom that the children have become a real issue. And so there are a lot of issues, and we know that nowadays there are a lot of young people on the street for whatever reason. Some parents are blaming the service providers like child protection because their intervention, they believe that it didn't help these children because they end up abusing the power, if you like. But also there are always elements of other issues such as trauma and lack of support, because African way is where you have a family and the village supporting one another, but that is not here anymore.
I suppose there's always a power dynamics really between parents and children at any home. What did your research found in relation to that when it comes to South Sudanese communities in Australia?
The power dynamic kind of shifted. There are so many factors to be said about this, because some parents, because parents are quite different, some parents have educational background, and when they come here, they can navigate around the new system because they live in the city before. Meanwhile, some parents never been to the city before. Those are the parents that are really struggling, because most of the time their children start to pick up the new language quite quickly, and then they end up with what we call role reversal, because they become more powerful because of the language. They understand the new system, and sometimes they can say to their parent that if you do this, you are actually violating my right. So the power kind of changed and shifted, and also they have interaction with their friends outside home. So again, with respect to the challenges that young people are facing in terms of acculturating into their new environment, there are always issues. When they go to school, they learn something new about their new culture. But when they come back home, some parents want to maintain aspect of their culture. And that doesn't work out very well, because most of the time children start to question some of the cultural values and say, why are we treated differently?
Can you tell us a bit more about what your study may have found in relation to how less educated parents, especially those who may be coming from a refugee background with little or no education at all, how those parents were able to compensate for the loss of power within the Australian context?
It is a very challenging part, and I realize that a lot of parents don't actually know where to go. They don't have support, and for that reason they're struggling. Some of them kind of give up. They give in to their children's demand, and as a consequence, those are the children that end up with antisocial behaviors. Some of these parents sometimes may not have male role model in the family for whatever reason. Either the woman came here with the kids, or the husband or the partner is not there at home. So there are a lot of issues that they're trying their best, but the community sometimes and relative and other family members and other support services are helping, but that is not adequate for those families. So really they're trying to find their way, but there are a lot of challenges, because this is a new environment, and especially if they don't speak the language and not aware, they don't know the culture of the new environment as well, it becomes very, very challenging.
What did your research found in terms of what sort of assistance there is in the system to help parents who are having difficulties raising their children in Australia? Parents obviously from the South Sudanese community or the broader African community?
What I found, what the participants spoke about consistently, because I interview about 60 parents and young people, what they talk about consistently is that they only get support from their family members, if they're lucky enough to have family members, from the community members. Meanwhile, community members also have their own issues, so they can help that much to some extent. And talking of external support service, because I was interested, I want to know what sort of support they were getting out there. There were a couple of barriers on that. One was the cultural barrier, the other one was the language barrier for some parents. And even some service also, what I kind of found out was some service only give support for the new arrived refugees or migrants at certain category for maybe up to 5 years or less. And when their time finish, they fall off. And from there, they don't have anybody to help them. They don't know where to go. So they struggle, they fall in the crack.
Dr. Santino, are you saying that there is pretty much no support for African parents or South Sudanese parents who are struggling to control their children in their homes. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, to acknowledge there are some services out there, but as I said, there are potential barriers. This barrier, language, the cultural barrier, and also sometime when the family moved to a new suburb, for example, like Windham area here, Melton and other places, maybe if they were having contact with some support service in the past, they don't have any contact anymore, like when they first arrived here. So they actually end up without any much support. So yes, there is, if there is, it very, very, very limited support that service are giving to African in this country.
What about young people? What did I tell you about this whole thing in relation to parenting and power dynamics inside the homes and all that sort of thing?
Well, some children are also, they also have some ideas. They give some advice to some young people as well to make sure that they focus on their studies and do the right things for their future. But some of the young people are saying that there are some parents who are trying to hold on to their very strong African parenting style, and that kind of lead to friction between parent and young person, because when they go out there, they know that other young people, maybe from other background or from the mainstream community, are not being treated the way they are, restricted. And most of the time, parents do have justification, because going out at night and going out there, you don't know what will happen to them, because there are potential racism as well. And so many issues that parents fear for, but yet young people, as a young person, also want to be out there and be treated like any other young person. So there are a lot of issues around restriction and parenting and wanting to hold on to certain cultural values.
Now, can you share with us some of the main findings of your study?
What I found, or what my research recommended, and mostly participants made their recommendation, is that there should be a continuous support, and support doesn't have to come from outside. Any service provider or the government agencies, they have to work with the community in what we call community centered, and family and parenting centered. And in that regard, family and parents and the community will be very much involved in the process of setting up any support service of that kind. So that is a very, very important part of really reaching out to give the support in the community, because most of the time some services are just out there set up in a way that they are set up, but not really culturally appropriate to reach out to this group. And also there is a need for to review the settlement policy in regard to when the newcomers arrive here, whether refugees or migrants that are given certain support, they need to review the time frame that is given to them. For example, if 2 years, 2 years actually is like a honeymoon for someone who moved to a new environment. So there is a need to look at extending the support beyond that limit of 2 or 5 years, so that they can really find out in later life being in a new environment. Because when you come to a new environment, you don't start to know exactly how bad things are until you start to learn about them. That is when you can begin to realize that, okay, yeah, there is this environment is really different for me, and I'm struggling to adjust. So that is where the needs are really can be met, although the foundation of helping them to settle well is the most important thing. The other thing also is to conduct more finding, especially on young people antisocial behaviors, because there must be something going on at home, and that is part of the parenting challenges that the parents have with their young people. Unless we address the root causes of the issues, there are going to be issues with young people out there, creating problems. So there is a need for further research in that area.
And given that I suppose you are now quite enlightened in relation to this issue, what would be some of the advice or recommendation you would make to South Sudanese parents, or by extension, the parents within the broader African Australian community?
I think there are, I made a number of recommendations on things that can help these young people to settle well and have a good future in their new environment. One of them is to have a very solid parenting program within the community to help these parents, because most of the time when parents are not well equipped and they're not really aware of the legislation that is related to children or to young person, they don't know what to do sometimes, and equipping them to help their children can be a milestone in helping the next generation to settle well in their new environment. The other thing also is to give them more support, because I realize that some young people are struggling academically, whether in high school, and the reason why they are struggling, some of them were either born here or grown up here, but there are issues sometimes. I worked in a school before. Some of the young people are being picked on because of being different, and that contribute to them dropping out of school, and that doesn't help them in the long run. So when you drop out of school, you end up on the street, and sometimes you feel like you don't have a future anymore. So they end up causing problem to get some attention. There are also lack of employment. Some young people, when they finish school or they want to look for a job, the job opportunities are not open up for them. So there is a need for helping them to get job, so that they can learn how to work and earn their living through hard work. And employers need to be educated, and the government need to take massive measures to really look into what can be done to curb the media that is kind of damaging African, so-called African appearance all the time, or Sudanese or something like that. Even if it may not be so relevant, I mean, we don't condone any sort of violence anyway, but the media is causing a lot of damage in the community in the way they report the crime. Even if these young people were born here, some of them were born here, they still say they came from this country or that country. So you can tell how African appearance are reported and others are reported, and there are now talks of deportation, which I believe is not a solution at all.
And in your study, did you hear anything either from the parents or the young people, the children, in relation to how the negative media reporting may affect their behaviors and their power dynamics inside their families?
Some young people that are really doing very well in their life, they are really very, very upset about what is going out there in the media. Not only because of the media, but also again those who are tarnishing the image of the community as a whole, because the media reporting it and the wider community don't see the difference when they saw something on home invasion or whatever. They think that all African are like that, or all Sudanese. South Sudanese are the one doing that, but there are really good young people. So there are some young people that say, even at high school or intermediate, they are called APEC gang, even if they never heard of that. What is APEC gang? Because APEC gang is a group that originated sometime back in Dandenong area, and that you see how it generates the hate as well. Because when you look at the social media, there are a lot of people making very really derogatory comments against Africans or against Sudanese, because they think that they shouldn't be here and all of those kind of things. So the message of the problem, this issue is kind of generating is actually hurting the community very much, because you see people become suspicious when they see you being black around them. So some young people are really concerned, and they're advising other young people to make sure that they do the right thing for their future.
So I suppose you're saying that the negative media reporting is not just affected the troubled youth, it is also affecting those young people who are doing well, because it makes it difficult for them eventually even to get jobs and things of that type.
I mean, the thing is, they don't see any difference when they see the young people, the young person, or even not so young, even us. People, you can see how they look at you, whether in public transport or in the market. You know, they just kind of relate you to those that they saw on the media. So the media is kind of doing it intentionally to hurt the community, and that is the process of othering those they don't believe are part of this community, and that is very unfortunate, because we really need to look into addressing issues without exaggerating them and without finding solution to that, because you know, as I read from some literature, some previous migrant who came here a long time ago have the same issues, and they overcome them. What it takes is support, and time also will help resolve some of these issues.
Well, Dr. Santino Deng, thank you very much for giving us a little bit of light into the parenting issues affecting South Sudanese communities in Australia, and by extension the whole of the African Australian community. We hope to have more time to discuss this matter a little bit further with you in the future.